The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 166.
Hey! Don't be scared. All of this is new to you and new can be scary. When people need help and never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the latest episode, the penultimate episode of this season, called Ascension of the Cybermen. Joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, sunshine.
So, it's a reference, you'll get it. Remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook, folks, if you can, at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. And follow us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and retweet the shows there if you can, and leave us comments in social media and various places. All of that, not only does that give us feedback for the show, but it also helps spread the news about the Secrets of Doctor Who and gets the podcast out in front of more people and helps us grow our audience. And we really appreciate that.
Which is particularly important now because we've got some new listeners because we're in a season of Doctor Who, but we're continuing on to talk about the rich history of Doctor Who in both television and movies and spin-off media, even between seasons. And so it's a great time to get the word out now so people can hear us talk about the end of this season. We're in the first part of a 2-part finale, or really the second part of a 3-part finale. But we're going to keep going on. So we want to let people know that. We want to let the people who will be interested because of the new season get on the boat now, and then they'll be with us for the voyage between seasons as well.
Come aboard. So just a little bit of news as we go, as you perhaps have heard, but Chris Chibnall, the showrunner, has announced, no surprise, he's coming back for next season. So that's not really a surprise. He's got some loose ends to tie up. I'm pretty sure that, that we're gonna have some stuff.
You said that before he came on that he had a bold master plan that he had presented to the BBC, and they didn't blink. And the first season that he did was really about just trying to bring on new viewers by not having any complex baggage from the show's past. Right. So everything was new. Now in this season, things are, and also have the Doctor win over the audience by being likable, which was job number 1 for the Doctor. Yep. And now the Doctor is getting darker and more complex, and we're having the Chibnall master plan start to unfold. But this is only Act 1 of the Chibnall master plan unfolding, so totally expected for him to be back next season.
Yep, and of course Jodie Whittaker is signed on to be back, so that's not a surprise either. I did see some comments where he said he'd love to have previous companions from previous eras of Doctor Who on. He specifically mentioned Sarah Jane, Harry Sullivan.
Of course, those actors are dead, so he can't. But,
right.
But he did mention Amy and Rory and another.
He said Tegan. He mentioned her by name. And Amy and Rory, and he did mention someone else. Was it Ace, perhaps?
Oh, I'd love to see Ace back.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Ace is so Sophie Aldred, who played Ace, is still very active. She's doing Big Finish stuff. And she just released a novel that the BBC advertised that she wrote about Ace meeting the 13th Doctor and the fam. It's called At Childhood's End, and it is set in a period of Ace's life after Ace left the 7th Doctor. And apparently things did not end well with the 7th Doctor, but she gets involved with the 13th Doctor and Team TARDIS, and they have an adventure, which I'm in the middle of reading.
Oh, cool. I'll have to take a look at that. So that's the news. Let's talk about this episode. This is I've seen some people talking online about it, who said this was confusing to them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to be confused about. Of course, I mean we're only halfway through this story that they're telling, so there's a lot of loose ends left.
They're using nonlinear storytelling, and they have two parallel timelines, and one of those timelines has multiple threads within it.
Yeah.
And they don't relate the two timelines together, so you need to see part 2 to watch the two timelines come together, and they haven't done that yet.
We might have theories. We might have theories about that, but...
I do.
Yeah.
What I want to know is the meaning of the title, Ascension of the Cybermen, because we don't see that. I don't know what the Ascension is. There's a moment later where towards the end of the episode where the lone Cyberman, Ashad, says the Ascension is beginning, and then he proceeds to do something that looks like attack another Cyberman.
Yeah.
But then the Cybermen are all still on his side, so it's like he was modifying them. But the nature of the Ascension, I mean, clearly he wants a rebirth of the Cyber Empire, but we don't. Turning on a bunch of Cybermen is not an Ascension.
Someone makes a comment at that point that I didn't quite catch, but they said something along the lines of that made me think that maybe he's modifying their emotion suppression.
Yeah, maybe,
because he doesn't have any emotion suppression as we've established.
Correct. Right. I don't know what the Ascension of the Cyberman is at this point.
Right. That's a question. So we start off this episode with the lone Cyberman, Ashad, giving a voiceover narration as we see the space debris of Cyberman parts, and there's a Cyberman head rolling through space at us. It's kind of creepily effective, and he says a bunch of stuff, but the effect of we've been defeated, we are victims of a billion battles, an empire of might and terror fallen, every empire falls, and that which is dead can live again in the hands of a believer. And so we establish that what he's trying to do is give a rebirth to the cyber empire that there's been this mutual destruction between humanity and the Cybermen, and they're, going down with the hands on each other's throats, essentially. And then after the credits roll, we get this scene of this Irish man on a bike on a back road in some indeterminate say 1950.
It looks like early 1900s, based on a plane that, as we see the baby grow up, he's playing with a plane that is a vintage plane.
Okay.
So it's after the invention of powered flight in around 1906 with the Wright brothers, but it's before you get modern jets and stuff. And then later, when we see the end of the child's career, it is so 1970s, the uniforms the guards are wearing.
Right.
It's like, okay,
and
this
the car,
is really
car in the background's a
70s.
70s era type car.
Right. So this is right. So what happens is this Irishman's riding his bike down a lane, finds a baby in a basket. He takes him home. No note, no nothing. They take him home. And he and his wife, you kind of get the sense that they can't have children of their own.
Yeah. That's all I can infer, because as the scene played out, we don't know anything about this guy or his wife. He brings home a baby, and they're playing it like this is a welcome thing. But I can't help thinking I'm a little realpolitik in terms of what are the possibilities here. And they didn't establish that this couple is infertile or which member is infertile.
Right.
And so I could, if they're not infertile, or if it's just the wife who's infertile, then part of my head is playing out like, oh yeah, honey, I totally buy that you just found this baby on the road and you're not at all its father.
By someone else. Yeah. That could be a thing. But of course, as things play out, that's a whole nother question that rises. So they raise him as their own. We see a montage. His name is Brendan. And
they name him Brendan.
Right.
Yeah.
They name him Brendan. He's got this distinctive red hair, very Irish red hair. And we're going to come back and forth to him. But right now we just have this growing up montage. Then he's
living in a parallel universe that's not connected with the rest of this episode.
Yes, exactly. I mean, whether literally or figuratively a parallel universe, but the events of what's going on with him are not. It's like a separate show. So then the Doctor and fam, we see them now in another place on a ridge, lugging equipment. They're in the far future, obviously an alien planet because there's a planet in the sky behind them, a ringed planet in the sky behind them. So we established they were somewhere else.
Yeah, but visually, I mean, they find this bombed out village. And my first thought, because I don't know if they established it early enough, I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
The ringed planet. But we were looking at this bombed out village and I'm thinking, this is the same village where they found the baby.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's not.
Yeah. In fact, there's a tower that looks suspiciously like either a Spanish or Italian like bell tower.
Well, there's a lot of like even like the church looks like your typical English countryside. Church.
Yeah. Well, they establish that it's the last remaining human settlement in the universe, the last 7 people alive.
This side of the universe.
I'm sorry, this side of the universe. Thank you. That's becomes important for later. And as they're coming down and they encounter the people, the 2 cyber shuttles, conveniently, show up, and the Doctor says, "I've come to help," and they begin setting up this defensive equipment, a neural inhibitor that will activate, do that whole thing where the Cybermen, once they know that they have the emotions unsuppressed, they go mad. Then there's a particle projector which projects particles of gold, which we talked about, right?
Yep.
That's been established as gold is bad for them.
I was gonna say, I think this is the first time in New Who that they've actually mentioned that.
Yes, yes. I'm really happy we actually did that episode from Classic Who. We have a. I'm not sure. Have we released that?
Harry
or not?
Sullivan is an idiot. Yes, we've released it.
Okay. We've had that one out, and then we have a force field which will zap them.
Fry them.
Yeah. Each companion gets one of these pieces of equipment and gets to explain it to one of the natives so that the audience knows what they are.
Right. And kind of point 2 is we don't see the TARDIS because the TARDIS was parked a half a mile away.
Yes,
and that's important for later.
Yeah. Thanks for creating artificial constraints.
Yeah. So as the Doctor told the Doctor in the mid-season surprise, the Doctor doesn't use weapons.
Yeah.
Well, the Doctor's using them now.
Yep.
Let's think about what we've got here.
Yeah.
We have the emotion uninhibitor, and Cybermen don't just go crazy like Graham has been led to believe they do when they get their emotions uninhibited based on what we've seen in New Who. They explode.
Yeah.
So this is a deadly weapon, and the Doctor's okay with that. She's the one who gave it to Graham. Then we have the gold particle projector, and gold clogs their vents and makes them unable to breathe, and thus they suffocate and die. So this is another deadly weapon, and the Doctor is okay with that because she gave it to Yaz. And then we have the force field that, according to Ryan, will fry any Cybermen who try to cross it. So that's a deadly weapon, and the Doctor is okay with that because she gave it to Ryan. And then the taboo of all taboos, guns. She goes to one of the refugees and says, "What do you have?" And the refugee says, "We have 2 guns and one of them's broken." And the Doctor says, "So basically nothing." So she was hoping they had more guns than they had. So we've got a little bit of realpolitik here with the Doctor. All that phony baloney virtue signaling is coming off now that we've got a situation where it's obvious even to the Doctor you need to use deadly force to deal with this threat.
Right.
And that's what's happened in prior Cybermen episodes. I mean, there's an episode coming up where Peter Davison's mild-mannered Doctor puts a gun to the chest of a Cyberman and pulls the trigger and kills it.
Right.
And So the Doctor has used deadly force, and not just on that occasion, but on others, has used deadly force with the Cybermen before, including with, I mean, we heard all about the glitter guns that were used, and the gold in the Tom Baker episode gets used. And so the Doctor is okay with using deadly force against this threat. I just wish they would integrate that into the character's personality consistently and say, yeah, I don't like to use weapons. I try to avoid them, but I will use them when necessary, because that's clearly what the character does.
And the Cybermen are not just robots. They are, they are people in there. They're heavily damaged people, heavily wounded, and not in control of their own faculties, but they're still people. You're still killing them. So it's, just something to keep in mind. So these weapons are terribly ineffective, unfortunately. They don't work at all. We have these flying cyber heads, they called cyber drones, that come in and target the defenses.
I was not a fan of the cyberhead drones.
Yeah, they're kind of weird.
They're the reason that the weapons don't work. I don't know if there is any wetware in those cyberheads. If there's not, that could be why they were immune to these weapons and were able to take them out in advance of the main cyber guard, on whom they presumably would have been effective.
Then we have the Doctor had told the 7 remaining humans to hide inside and no one leave that bombed out building that has absolutely no defense to it, because it would be terrible. But then this mute brother and another girl, the mute brother panics and this other girl chases him out and they get killed. And I'm thinking to myself, why was running away bad? I mean, is it any worse than sitting still and getting killed? I mean, they were sitting ducks to begin with, right? I mean, it just...
And the Doctor then tells them to run. This is an interestingly filmed scene where outside they're using a super gritty form of camera work and lighting, and we have an aerial bombardment from the viewpoint of the people being bombarded and from the viewpoint of the drones unleashing the bombardment.
Right.
And this is something a little different than what we often see in Doctor Who battles, having a gritty, it feels like almost like a war movie.
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of cinematography is something that's a little different. I like that. What I don't understand is why the Cybermen want to kill these people instead of upgrading them, especially if your cyber empire has been wiped out. You need new recruits.
Right.
So you should if you're ever going to kill human beings, it should be when you're strong. When you're weak, you should not kill them. You should be upgrading them to build your own numbers. So I didn't understand that, and they don't address that at all in the show. But I did like there's a genuinely grim feeling here, and the Doctor is in command. And I like the Doctor being in command in this situation. And at one point she says to herself, I've been so reckless with you. Right. If you're captured, they will assimilate you. And that's true. So I like all those aspects, but what I don't like is the logic problem we have here.
Right. Yeah, I do like that moment where she says, I've been too reckless with your lives because you can be converted. And again, like I said last week, this brings, to me, she's thinking of Bill most recently and how that turned out for Bill. And so I like this, like you said, this doctor who's in command, who's a little darker, a little, more worried about things and not happy, go, as she was, and flat command structure. So I'm enjoying that part of the Doctor's personality coming out here. So Ashad, the lone Cyberman, shows up with a couple other goons. He's got friends this time. And as Ryan and Graham and Yaz are running to this, the aliens, I'm sorry, the remaining humans ship, Ryan gets separated from them, and they get on the ship. It takes off. Graham and Yaz. Ryan and some of the other humans get left behind. I think two of them, a father and a son, and the lone Cyberman corners the father and son, kills the father, and is going to kill the son, but then tells him, you're going to be the last human alive. I'm going to leave you alive to tell the tale of the Cybermen and our, whatever, our implacability or whatever. And
to all the other races that are out there who are all going to die.
Right.
Yep.
He's gone from this Cyberman. He talks, at different points of the episode. In fact, when he confronts the Doctor later, he says something along the lines of, and I have to say, this is part of my, some of the dialogue was confusing to me, so I'm still struggling with it. But something along the lines of, he's decided that it's not enough to just assimilate, upgrade humans. He just wants to destroy the universe, essentially. Destroy everything.
It sounded like that. Yeah. I mean, and I didn't have trouble understanding him, but it on a semantic level, it's like, okay, why do you want to kill everything? Yeah. Does that include Cybermen?
Well, I think this is, kind of the megalomania that comes with receiving the Cyberium.
Right.
Because he keeps bringing it up, the Cyberium is showing him and telling him and helping, I think it's kind of part of that of he understands that now he's got supreme power.
Right. And this is where the Doctor keeps saying at this point, oh, we can't make it to the TARDIS. It's too far away. We'd die. Well, that seems like poor planning. Why'd you park the TARDIS all the way over there? Why didn't you park it here? If it's so far away that you can't run for it, you'll die. Why didn't you land in the middle, load 7 people on it, because there's only 7, and fly away? Hello? I get you need the drama, but it just seems like such an artificial constraint. So, but I'll put a pin in that, move it aside, and continue on. But yeah.
Well, it's also the second episode where they've done that, where the TARDIS is, a mile away or a half a mile away.
Yeah, they've done this a lot.
Close.
Yeah.
They could have handled it with dialogue. They could have beamed down the TARDIS right in the middle of the city, and they could have, as soon as the characters are outside of it, and they try to get back into the TARDIS, there's been an explosion and the TARDIS is buried.
Right.
Or they just say, this is a dialogue fix, they just say the Cybermen have some kind of TARDIS dampening field that has locked it. They've time locked the TARDIS, and now we can't get into it.
Even simpler. There's a Cyberman standing right in front of the front door of the TARDIS. We can't get in.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So instead, what we have is the Doctor has to hijack a cyber shuttle. So she reunites
with... Before that, she's got to save the guy whose father or whatever died.
Yeah.
And so the Doctor, who doesn't use weapons, remember that, uses a grenade.
She makes a bomb.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another deadly weapon. She tries to kill the lone Cyberman with it.
Right. Yes. She knocks him down. The boy escapes. She gets connected with Ryan again, and then they hijack a cyber shuttle, where she tells us that when she was a teenager, she used to what was it?
Hotwire cyber ships or hotwire warp drives on weekends, but we don't have warp drives or weekends or teenagers.
No, teenagers or weekends.
We don't have teenagers or weekends.
Right. So she's trying to, and then the boy says, "No, I got a simpler method." And we established that his whole life has been at war with the Cybermen. It's like he grew up as a war baby.
He started learning how to hotwire warp drives at age 4.
So then we have we go back to Brendan, the Irish orphan baby, and I have a note here where I say, and I give my theory right here at this point in the episode. Brendan or his father is the lone Cyberman. That's my theory. Is Ashad.
Oh, okay. So that was my theory as soon as I saw the guy on the bicycle.
Okay.
But I think that is not the case. I think the actors are different.
Yeah. They are.
In this scene, so at this point, Brendan has grown up enough. I mean, we've had a montage of you know his parents taking care of him and putting a thermometer in his mouth when he's sick and stuff. But now he's grown up and he's joining the Irish police, the guards, or Garda, and he's having his interview with a guy who's already on the force, and the guy alludes he's like, why do you want to be a guard? And his adopted father starts to speak up for him, and he shuts that down and let him speak for himself. He says, I want to make a difference. And he says, I was with your father the day that they found you. And I'm like, you told this kid he's a foundling in early 20th century Ireland? Do you know the stigma that attaches to that?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of popped me out of the story.
Yes. Now, that was my theory at the point. But actually, as we've been talking in this episode, I have a new theory considering how it ends and the title of next week's episode. So
you've arrived at my theory.
I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. So we'll come back to that. So we find out that the group that Graham and Yaz are with, they were headed for something called the Boundary, which they say is a gateway that will take you to a random part of the universe. So
it's like a time doorway in Land of the Lost.
Yes,
just always random.
I love that deep cut reference there. So the Cybermen can't follow because it's random every time it opens, and so they can't necessarily follow you. So they're heading there, but the ship they are is ramshackle, and they're not sure they're going to make it. The Lone Cyberman shows up on the Doctor's shuttle via hologram and claims that he was, like, she kind of starts talking to him as if he was involuntarily upgraded by the Cybermen, and so he should overcome that. And then he says, no, I'm fine with that. And she says, I feel that would seem too easy. I feel like I should charge you for therapy. And he says, no, I was a willing recruit.
Yeah, he says he was a willing recruit, but he was rejected for a reason. And this, I couldn't hear in the audio. It was low quality, and I couldn't quite hear what he said. But something caused the Cyber Empire to reject him, which may be why he's only partially assimilated. Mm-hmm. But he says he hid in the shadows, and now he knows he's got this real purpose. And so basically, he's a self-hating Cyberman wannabe.
Yep.
Right.
Well, I watched with the second time I watched with the
captioning on
comment, or the captioning on, and it really doesn't say why he was rejected. It just said that he was rejected.
I wonder again if it has something to do with the title of next week's episode, that maybe he wasn't compatible with Upgrade.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we back to Brendan, the Irish policeman who is chasing a criminal to the edge of the cliffs of insanity, or the cliffs of Moher, or just cliffs in Ireland, where there seems to be lots of sheer cliffs in Ireland, apparently. And he's chasing the criminal. The criminal turns the tables on him, shoots him, and he falls off the cliff to the bottom, where we think he's dead, but he's fine now. In fact, he doesn't even have a bullet hole in him. And
his uniform does, though.
Yes. And we could see Dad standing nearby looking on, doesn't trust him anymore, has this look on his face like considering, what's going on here with this foundling child.
It's obvious he's from Krypton. You find the child on the road, and then bullets don't affect him, and he's stronger than a locomotive and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
I was going to say, he's actually Gallifreyan, and he just regenerated after he fell, but he looks the same.
Well, that's on this show.
Yeah. Well, if he leaps tall buildings, he should leap tall cliffs. So the refugee shuttle breaks down. It breaks down in the midst of a cloud of dead Cybermen. And so they have to. So Graham and Yaz, I have to say, in this episode
brings a new meaning to spare parts.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have to say, like, Yaz in this episode, and in fact, the last couple, she's really taken charge. She's really sort of become the leader in various situations, which I think is interesting.
She is self-actualized now.
Yes.
In a way that she was not before. Graham is similar, but he's an older man.
Right.
And Ryan still has not self-actualized.
Nope. He's still kind of following behind. But Yaz doesn't give up. There's always a solution. She's really, sort of taking on some of the Doctor's characteristics that are typical. And so this shuttle
and so has Graham, because he is like, he and Yaz both are very much, we are not giving up here.
Right.
We are going to keep going. And
there's always
Graham,
hope.
I noticed Graham, like, in not just this episode, but in other episodes too, has been referring to people as sunshine. And then he, in this episode, when he's got this one guy who's like, oh, we're all going to die. It's like, yes, thank you, Eeyore. Nice Winnie the Pooh reference there.
I did notice that.
But then we get Pascal, and this is a little sketchy, but so basically they're on the ship. They have minimal life support that, if they don't go fast, will cause them to all die for lack of life support before they get to the Boundary. But if they go fast, they will break down. and also die of no life support. And so the engineer sort of lady is going fast, and the other guy is like, no, you can't go this fast. And they say the system is going to melt down. And then we have the most minimal meltdown of a reactor ever in history, where it just knocks everybody to the ground, basically, and that's it.
Yep.
We didn't even see a hydrogen explosion. I mean, that's what really knocks stuff down when you have a reactor meltdown.
Yep.
But then they're losing oxygen at an even greater rate, and they discover in this asteroid field of cyber parts that there is a ship out there. And so they decide to do Pascal's oxygen wager.
Yeah.
where it's like, we don't know if we're going to be able to get on that ship or if there's oxygen, but if we don't, we're dead. So let's wager that we can get there and it will have oxygen. And what we need to do is vent our own oxygen here, and for some to push us over there, which is okay, fine. I don't know how much oxygen you've really got if you're that low on life support, how much thrust you're going to generate.
They also mentioned rotating or moving all power to propulsion as well.
From life support.
So they would have both the propulsion and the oxygen.
They were turning off all the power. Yeah.
Well, they were redirecting all the power, but I thought they were redirecting it to the life support, which wouldn't make any sense. I mean, you've got a finite amount of oxygen. Adding electricity wouldn't make any sense. But maybe you're right. Maybe I didn't hear something and it was to the propulsion.
Well, they show the ship too as it's rocketing, pun intended, to the ship with the propulsion on the bottom of the thing as well.
Yeah.
So.
And so they give us a visually impressive thing of this that makes no sense, of this thing tumbling through the asteroid cyber field and then just happening to magically slot itself into the docking bay of the ship.
Yes.
And it would have been much more believable if they had had a more controlled flight where we could see what was propelling them, and they're not just tumbling randomly and then magically happen to go in the door the right way.
It was a heck of a interstellar hockey slap shot.
Yeah.
Or 8-ball in the corner pocket. So while they're there, the cyber shuttle with a shot on it shows up outside, and so then we cut to the Doctor arriving at the boundary, and it turns out they kept referring to it as Koshamas. Well, Koshamas isn't a place; it's a person. It's the basically the
old dude,
the gatekeeper at the boundary, and it was my first thought here was there's a trope in movies about people trying to escape from oppressive regimes where there's always the place beyond reach, where if you can make it there, there's freedom to be had. And
like Logan's Run and all kinds of things.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then the hero's journey, they get there, and it turns out that it's a honey trap. And in fact, it was set up by the oppressive regime to catch anybody who managed to get away from the other thing, and that Koshamas would be the human who is allowed to lure them in exchange for survival. And we don't know whether that's true or not, but that was my initial impression of the boundary, since no one else is there.
Yeah, I had something similar where, the liberation you're finding is a metaphor. This is really, this is death.
Right.
You go through the boundary and you die. So I didn't involve the Cybermen necessarily, although I was aware of that possibility. But I had the same vibe about, this could easily fit into the too good to be true sanctuary.
So I looked at it more of like a myth of they would get there and it's nothing there. Kind of like the episode where we Derek Jacobi Master, where they've got this place, the universe is dying, and they got this place they can go to that is, the stars are diamonds, that kind of thing. I figured it was kind of along that lines too.
In fact, this episode feels very much like that one. End of the universe, the place that the last remnants of humanity can escape to, and a little bit of spoilers, and the Master somewhere in all
the
that.
Master.
So it's a very interesting, and I don't know whether that's conscious or not, but it is very much an interesting feels like that, Chando. So the refugees on the war carrier, it turns out that the ship that they got onto was a Cybermen war carrier. Graham and the lady start looking
and
around.
Now that we know we're on a cyber war carrier, it takes them a ridiculously long amount of time to ask, what is this carrying if it's a war carrier?
Yeah.
And then they're running around unnecessarily pressing things.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, that's not a good idea. If you know you're in dangerous territory, you don't go around unnecessarily pressing buttons. You're likely to activate something you don't want to activate, which is exactly what happens.
Were there any other cyber shuttles in the hangar bay? Maybe you could have got on one of those.
That was my thought. It's like, as soon as you realize, let's give them until the point where they actually, Graham and his friend there help open up the first cabinet with a Cyberman.
Yeah.
My reaction would have been, okay, where's the next cyber shuttle? We're out of here.
Exactly. Well, and so there's this one moment, and this is a nice little bit of language here, linguistics here, where Graham is about to open the door. He says, "Oh, well, let's have a butcher's look." And she's like, "Well, what?" He says, "Don't you know Cockney rhyming slang?"
No, he says, "Let's have a butcher's."
Oh, right.
And she's like, "What?" And he says, "Butcher's hook, look."
Yes.
Cockney rhyming slang.
Yes. So, Jimmy, can you give us a quick explanation of that? Do you know enough about it?
Yeah. So Cockney rhyming slang, as the name would suggest, is a form of slang that is famous for being used in Cockney circles in England. And the idea is you take a word that sounds like a word or phrase, typically a phrase that sounds like something else, that rhymes with something else, and then you just use the first part of it. So, for example, there's a scene in The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin where Reginald Perrin's son comes over who's using Cockney rhyming slang, and he says, "How are the dustbins doing?" And it's not understood what that means, and so he says, "Dustbin lids, kids. How are the kids doing?" But he just refers to them as dustbins. Right. And then when another character comes over, Reginald Perrin's son-in-law, Tom, his son, Mark, says, "So, how are the dustbins? Giving you much trouble?" And Tom, who is kind of a nerd and doesn't get this, says, "Oh, yes, much less. We've changed them with plastic ones."
and apparently you can't just use any phrase. There's very specific conventions in use here. So if someone hears let's have a butcher's with butcher's hook, butcher's look, that sort of thing, you'd
butcher's
understand.
Hook and hook rhymes with look,
right?
So let's have a look becomes let's have a butcher's.
Yes. So it's fun. I love language. It's funny how it works. So I just thought that was an interesting insight into a particular culture. So
what this is a kind of leet speak.
Yes.
Because you have to be in the know to get these references.
Right. So it turns out that the carrier is a troop carrier, and it's full of 100,000 or so sleeping old school looking Cybermen.
Yeah, I like the 80s style heads, even as the bodies are the more modern Cybermen. The heads look a lot like the 1980s style.
Yeah, actually, it's hundreds of thousands because they say there's like 1,000 on this deck, and there are hundreds of decks.
Right, that's true.
I had a note on this part of the show that Graham at this point is getting annoying writing Eeyore, and he keeps just shoving it in his face that we saved you and therefore things are not hopeless, and that just keeps coming up, and Graham's getting annoying about it.
Well, he even says, I'm gonna remind you on the hour, every hour on the hour.
Yeah, right. And that was annoying, but I do like there's a great exchange where when Graham and Future Lady, who doesn't know Cockney rhyming slang, are going off to press unnecessary buttons, somebody tells Graham, I think it's somebody tells Graham, "Be careful," and he says, "I was born careful," and Yaz says, "That's actually true."
And I thought you were going to mention when the the future lady says to him, "You're a strange man," and he takes exception to that. She goes, "No, strange is good. I like strange." And he's like, "Oh, well."
Yeah, it's like a little post hint of maybe we're over grace enough to have a romance.
Yes. So now the doctor is at the boundary place with Ryan and the boy they rescued. I wish I knew everybody's names, but I don't.
Ethan, I think.
Ethan. Okay.
Either Ethan or Evan.
Oh, it's Ethan. So turns out that Koshamas was an escapee from a processing center where people were being upgraded. He got away, and that he helped everybody else get through the boundary, but he stayed behind in what he thought until now was the vain hope that more humans would show up to go. So you get the idea that it's been a long time, like years, maybe decades, since other humans have made it this far to escape to safety.
It's interesting that you brought up the sanctuary that turns out not to be great trope, because that's in Logan's Run. And both in the novel, it's a little different, but in the movie, it's very definitely there.
Yeah.
And in the movie, when they get there, when they get out of the City of Domes and they're heading to Sanctuary, and they go to Washington D.C., where they find this old man.
Yeah.
And he's got a white beard and stuff. I think he's maybe played by Peter Ustinov. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of that guy.
Right.
When we were introduced to Koshamas.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of that. So now back on the troop carrier, like we mentioned, the Ashad starts doing something like attacking the other Cybermen, which wakes them up and makes them follow him. And they're coming.
I think it's like he's drilling or something, and we see sparks flying, and they're screaming. And our gang, who's watching from the control room, is like whatever he's using on them is able to make Cybermen scream.
Yeah,
and that could be an indication that he's doing something with their emotion on inhibitors.
Right. And then he takes 10,000 of them to walk to the bridge, because, that's how many you need. And then we flash to back to Brendan for the last time in this episode. He's now an old man retiring from a long career at the Guard. And as he leaves carrying his clock, that is a retirement gift. We've seen people carrying clocks that have
special significance
and fire alarms.
Yes. And he's met by his dad, who's strangely young.
And the other cop who recruited him, who's also strangely young.
Yep. And they say, "Oh, we've got to take you to the back room." And he goes willingly, meekly.
Without a word. Doesn't even say a word. Yeah.
Yep. And they connect him up to some equipment and zap him to, as some of the dialogue implies, they're removing his memory.
Yeah, he says, "It's too bad you won't remember your service, but we've got to eliminate every scrap of evidence." And they basically hook him up. They give him what looks like electroshock therapy.
Right. And that's where we end with him. So that's to be continued. Now we're on the...
Except they don't put anything in his mouth to keep him from biting his tongue.
Yeah, that seems
like... You always want to do that if you're giving someone electroshock.
Make a note, and next time you're giving someone some electroshock, don't do that, folks. Don't shock people.
Not unless you're a qualified medical professional.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So the doctor back on the boundary planet goes with Koshamas to the beach where they're going to access the boundary. And as she tells you have to get closer to it. You have to approach it. I'm like, don't go closer.
I know.
Something bad
it felt so creepy. Yes. I mean, and then the boundary starts to open up and it's a big purple Stargate.
Yes. And then we see on the other side, it's Gallifrey destroyed, as we saw before earlier in the season. And the master emerges from it and says, "Be afraid, Doctor, because everything is about to change forever."
And as soon as he pops out, I said, "Oh."
Yeah. And yes, and then we're going to get some closure, hopefully, on the Timeless Child trope that we've got.
I like he comes out as, "That was a good entrance, right?"
Yes. Yeah. They've got the writing of this master down pretty well, I think, with this character. So I'm enjoying him.
So before we do theories,
yes,
few preliminary notes just about the episode in general.
Yes.
Yep.
I think Chibnall's Cybermen are the best of New Who.
Yeah.
What he's done with the Cybermen this season it feels much scarier, much more realistic. He's got the body horror going. He's got more psychologically complex Cybermen. He has these gritty war story type things. They're way better than anything Davies did with the Cybermen. Right. And they're better than everything Moffat did, with the possible exception of the last two where Bill got assimilated and it was World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls. I'd have to rewatch those to see, do I like Chibnall's Cybermen better? But so far, I'm really liking Chibnall's Cybermen. I think the Cybermen very often are a disappointment because they come off as if they're just, oh, here are the robots we're going to defeat again. And there's so much more than that. And Chibnall is exploring the more than that. And if the Ascension does involve permanently changing their emotional structure, that will make them more interesting. So there are... So the Mondasian, bring back the original Cybermen, was good. This is a good take on them. I like that. I do have a concern that Chibnall is destroying too many empires because we've got the Cybermen wiped out and we've got Gallifrey wiped out at the moment, and that can't last forever. And in fact, I think one or both of those is going to get the rug pulled out from under it next episode or in the very near future. And you don't... It's just too close together, destroying big empires and bringing them back. And it's like, let them just be what they are. You don't have to constantly be destroying stuff just to amp up the stakes. Especially, we don't even see the destruction. It's not like we got a season-long story arc about the end of the Cyber Wars or the downfall of Gallifrey. Just telling us, doing something off screen and telling us about it is not drama.
Which they've done already. This was the beginning of New Who, as we spent several seasons, a number of seasons, with Gallifrey destroyed off screen and the Daleks Empire destroyed. Like we've kind of done that, so let's not keep doing that. Which is a good point.
When the Cybermen are marching after they're all active at the end of the season, and we see them, marching down gangways and stuff, I have a note that this feels more dark than seeing a billion Daleks buzzing around at Journey's End and stuff. Right. This feels much more of a threat than a bunch of pepper pots flying around did.
Right.
One quick thing, they mentioned about as they're on that little escape craft. I think it was Yaz mentions about, we've been stranded in space before. And of course, that's a reference to Ghost Monument, where they teleport to where the TARDIS was supposed to be, and they're in the middle of outer space.
Yes.
That
true.
was a nice, and actually, yes, do not take any deep breaths if you're about to experience explosive decompression. Do the reverse. Blow all of the air out of your lungs.
Right. You don't want to be a balloon. All right. So let's talk theories of what's going on, what we can expect to see, who the various figures are.
So one thing that I saw someone comment online is, given that the barrier shows us Gallifrey and we've got the Timeless Children and stuff, looks like Gallifrey was in Ireland after all.
Right. That's a callback to the
Third Doctor.
Yes. Yeah. So Brendan, what do you think? Is he perhaps he's
a timeless child?
So he's one of the Timeless Children. Does that make him a Time Lord?
It depends on what the relationship between the Timeless Children and the Time Lords is.
Yeah.
I've seen one theory that someone has promoted that it turns out that Gallifreyans are actually like evolved humans.
That's possible.
And that's where he comes from.
It's not impossible. So let's think about the Timeless Children for a second. We now know that originally we only knew of one, that there was a timeless child buried in the Doctor's memories, but we didn't know who that was or anything of what made it timeless. It was something forgotten and abandoned. But then the title for next week's episode is The Timeless Children. So clearly there's more than one. This episode is clearly a setup for that. So Brendan has to be a timeless child. So what makes a child timeless? Well, he does something very much like regeneration, except his appearance doesn't change, but otherwise we'd classify this as regeneration. And we know, and so that's something that could be what makes a child timeless. We also have evidence of a previously a past regeneration that the Doctor doesn't know about in her own history that could indicate a pre-Hartnell cycle of regenerations. And in fact, when we see the timeless child in the Doctor's memories, it's a little black girl. And the previous incarnation, the mystery incarnation, the Ruth Doctor or Dr. Ruth that we see, is a black woman. And so, as I hypothesized at the time, maybe that timeless child grows up to be Ruth. And so, based on the various pieces we have here, it looks like there is a group of timeless children that may regenerate indefinitely. And they periodically then need their memories wiped to preserve
the secret.
Protect the secret, and possibly to protect the fiction that Time Lords can only regenerate 12 times. And so I am aware of some theories suggesting that that maybe the Time Lords got regeneration from the Timeless Children. Maybe there are two different groups. But however that's the case, given the pieces we have on the board now, I mean, we see a timeless child, Brendan. We see his memory being wiped. And we know the Doctor has a timeless child, which is presumably her, given in her memory, given the child she sees and what we now know about a previous incarnation of hers. It looks to me like the Doctor is the little black timeless child who grew up, had a cycle of regenerations, eventually had her memory wiped and went out as William Hartnell, then got another cycle of regenerations, which maybe was always there at the end of Matt Smith's time. And there's a huge lie connected with all this involving the Master as well. And the Master, my guess is the Master's also a timeless child. Yeah, and knows his memory has been messed with by the Time Lords to preserve this secret, and that's why he wanted to destroy Gallifrey, because he personally, maybe he's not a Gallifreyan, maybe the timeless child people are different than the Gallifreyans, and he believes the Gallifreyans messed with him, and that warranted their destruction. They made him think he was one of them, when really he's not. They made him think he had a limited number of lives when really he doesn't. Something along those lines. I'm not saying all those details will pan out, but I'm guessing that this is the general shape of what we're going to find out with these characters.
Now,
Cory?
the one thing I when you look at the Brendan scenes, though, they're different. They're soft focus. They're kind of a sepia tone.
Yep.
Which kind of makes me think that those aren't literal historical events. That
false memory, or
it might be like a false memory or a parable, if you will, of something that actually happened. So it could be someone's interpretation, like you mentioned, like maybe the Master or even the Doctor remembering something from the past, but remembering it in a false memory way, where that's not an actual event that happened in Ireland in the early 1900s into the mid 1900s, but actually something different time, different place, but the same basic idea.
That could be, although television shows often use color filters and things like that to show us this is occurring in the past.
Oh, I agree with you on that, but that's another theory I'm kind of throwing out there, that this isn't, because how does it explain then the dad and the sergeant or the other the other guard suddenly being aging, and then suddenly they're young again?
Yeah,
so
they'd have to be involved in the conspiracy. Right, against the timeless children,
which is why I have that thought that maybe it's not actually a historical event that we're seeing, but we're seeing someone's interpretation of it.
It's distorted
something
memory.
else that happened.
Memory,
like I said, a false memory, but that's pointing to something else that actually did happen.
Yeah, I came around to thinking that Well, then this. Well, I can't remember thinking the way you have Jimmy, like that Brendan is one of the Timeless Children. But then there's the question of where does Ashad fit into all of this? Where does Ashad, the Lone Cyberman, the Ascension of the Cybermen, how do they fit into this question too? And that's I have less of a grasp on. That's still a little weird.
He could be just what he says he is, an enthusiastic recruit to the cyber cause. Or it could be more than that. Like you suggested, maybe the reason he was rejected and they didn't fully convert him is because he's not a human. He's a timeless child.
Yeah. Yeah, that would make it interesting if the Master, the Doctor, and the Cyberman are all the three or three of the Timeless Children, along with Brendan, who maybe the Brendan is one of the Master's prior incarnations. That would be interesting too. That he doesn't remember. So that's interesting. There's a like we said at the beginning, there's a lot of threads that get untied here this episode. Hopefully they all get tied. Many of them anyway get tied back up again in the second part.
Now I'm gonna throw another possible theory. I'm not saying that this is a definite or not, but Ruth is actually a tie-in to next season.
That would be cool.
She doesn't. I don't know if they'll do it or not. But like you talk about how Chibnall's got kind of this master plan.
Yeah.
What if she was thrown in this season to then point to next season?
That she'll be back next season. Yeah.
Well, in terms of appearances, I mean, I love Ruth. She was more fun than Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor.
Yeah.
Frankly, I would love to see more of Ruth. Are you proposing, though, Father, that she's the next incarnation of the Doctor?
No, not as a regeneration. I'm saying that that whole issue may not even be resolved next episode at all.
That's possible.
I'm not saying, and I'm just throwing this out as a theory, not saying whether I agree with it or not. It just is a possibility of they did that to have that hook in this season to tie to next. Because if he's doing an overarching plan that's more than one season, that would make a lot of sense that you would have something this season that's big that ties into next season.
Yeah. And I don't expect all of our questions to be answered. I mean, I do want closure on who are the Timeless Children and where does Ruth fit into the Doctor's timeline. But I suspect that there will be questions we will not have answered because, what this feels like to me is a retread or, revivification of the Cartmel master plan. And the whole point behind the Cartmel master plan was back in the 1980s was to make the Doctor more mysterious again by making the Doctor this pivotal figure from Time Lord history. And this is essentially the same sort of thing. We're trying to make the Doctor more mysterious again. So I suspect we will have it revealed the Doctor is a timeless child. And maybe that's not the same thing as a Gallifreyan or a Time Lord. And that would be a way of reintroducing mystery. Because if we know the Doctor who we've assumed is in this one category is really kind of also in a different category, that adds mystery. Right. And that's the function of doing all this. I've seen a lot of commenters on YouTube who are not as, I mean, they may know the history of the show, but I don't feel like they're deep fans in the same way. Who have been freaking out about the idea of pre-Hartnell incarnations as if that's sacrosanct, when in fact it never was. And the old show did not treat it that way. And the 12 regeneration limit was a very late introduction after we'd had indications, I mean, clear on-screen indications of pre-Hartnell Doctors. And they're going like, what would be the point of this? The point is to, and it would ruin the Doctor if we knew that there was this additional backstory. It's like, why? That just creates more mystery. There are vast stretches of the Doctor's life we don't know anything about.
Exactly.
And if the Doctor's in this other weird category, is not quite a normal Time Lord, that just creates more mystery. That's the point. It makes the Doctor more intriguing and creates more room for storytelling.
Right. Yeah. Have you been watching Doctor Who very long? Because they don't. Yeah, this sort of thing is pretty much par for the course.
Well, and we talk about canon in Doctor Who, which doesn't really exist.
Yes, it's not like
Star Trek where there's actually books of canon. Doctor Who, it plays pretty fast and loose with canon and always has. I'd
say in rigor of canon, you have Star Wars at the top, Star Trek in the middle, and Doctor Who is at the bottom, where anything can go at any time when they decide to.
All you got to say is the Time War wiped everything out, and that just changes canon. So,
well, but you can also flip it the other way, because since you can always say that, everything in Doctor Who is canon. It's even more canon oriented than Star Wars.
That's right. All right. I think that's where we should wrap things up for this time. We are obviously looking forward to the season finale. I can't believe it's here already. This has been too quick of a season. 10 episodes,
which is a sign we enjoyed it.
Yes, exactly. I think we're going to have a wrap up retrospective episode after next week, so just keep in mind that we're going to be doing that. But my overall impression of this episode is, even where there were times where I had a hard time following things, I enjoyed it. Just because it's hard to follow doesn't mean it's not good. I mean, that makes it sometimes better.
And this might be one of these episodes that when we do see the next episode, everything's going to click.
Yes. You cannot watch them apart from each other, that they're one story, and that together they're better than the sum of their parts, like Cybermen. No, so we are going to have next week's episode. We'll definitely we have a lot to talk about. So let's wrap things up here. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Penelope W., Jonathan L., Pam, James M., and Vincent D. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. Let us know what you thought of Ascension of the Cybermen. You can send us your feedback by going to comment at sqpn.com/Doctor Who, or you can go to the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And, of course, we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the season finale episode, The Timeless Children. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Sunshine.
And once again, I'm Sunshine Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, every empire falls, but that which is dead can live again in the hands of a believer, even Gallifrey.
Right. This is going to be fun.